5 years ago, when I started my residency training, someone had told me I'll be delivering my graduation speech here in Tenwek. I would have asked him if he was a prophet of doom or a naysayer. In January 2017, however, I started my training as a surgical resident in the Pan-African Academy of Christian Surgeon Parks in Mbingo, Cameroon, which was based in southwest Cameroon, with the hope to finish there as a complete surgeon grounded in surgical skill and more rooted in the word of Christ. But that would never happen. How did I even find my path to PACS? Why not residence in Nigeria? So many people ask me, what am I doing in Kenya? Distinguished guest of honor, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to take the next couple of minutes of your time as I tell you one of the most important stories of my life. The period of my life between 21st of July and 18th August 2014 was a close shave. It was a period of my life I don't wish to experience ever again. I battled one of the deadliest hemorrhagic fever viruses known to man, a virus that has a kill rate of about 70 to 80%, and to put this in context, 7 to 8 people out of 10 that contract the virus die. A virus so scary that survivors have been stigmatized, and I was indeed stigmatized after the whole saga. Still remember very clearly the words of Dr. David Brett Major, an experienced American general infectious disease specialist, who after he had briefly examined me on my sick bed, while fully kitted in Ebola hazmat suit, told me, "Doc, I'm afraid you're likely positive for Ebola virus. We will take you to the Ebola Isolation Center and carry out further tests." What that statement literally meant to me was that I was going to die. I was in isolation center for 16 days, a 16-day period of terror and despair, whereby I felt it was all over for me. The diarrhea and vomiting were frequent and unstoppable. They sapped energy out of me to the point that a short distance between my bed and the restroom felt like 1,000 miles. I entertained the idea of just sitting in the restroom all day just to conserve my energy. But it was not helpful. The best position for comfort could only be achieved by lying prostrated on the bed. I literally begged for an IV access, an intravenous fluid, but it was to no avail as my veins had already collapsed. The only option left for me was to take oral rehydration solution, which we call ORS, which in the mouth of an Ebola patient provoked more vomiting. This ORS was only doing the opposite of what it was meant to do. Yet that was the only thing I needed to survive. Gulping large quantity of ORS was a recipe for disaster. You chew up more than what you have actually taken in. You can imagine a scenario whereby I was losing every fluid in my body, but not a drop of it was being replaced. I lost weight within days as I began to notice my clothes were saggy. Psalm 23 verse 4 says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." I don't remember how many times I read this popular Psalm chapter while in isolation. But one thing I remember is God's comfort was with me, such that even when my eyes were bloody red, and I thought the next thing was to bleed to death, when people were dying all around me, bleeding from their mouth and nostrils, when I was having countless diarrhea, vomiting, with fever eating the roof, when I could not even tolerate oral sips, which the doctor said would keep me alive, God in his infinite mercy sustained me and declared me a victor in the battle against Ebola virus. Time will not permit me to narrate further to you in details how I began to turn the corner. But I must thank my wife who was there for me. She took the battle to the spiritual realm and she conquered. Looking at what she went through emotionally and psychologically, when all hope was lost for me, I think it is fair to say she is also an Ebola survivor. And I'll crave your indulgence to give her a round of applause, even as I continue. Every cloud we say has a silver lining. My silver lining, as far as my story is concerned, was knowing PACS. I was invited to a conference where I was asked to tell my story about how I survived Ebola. Coincidentally, a past graduate from Mbingo, Cameroon, Dr. Anthony Nesor, was in attendance, and after telling him my story and how I was planning to start my surgical training, he referred me to his colleague who encouraged me to apply to PACS. Choosing Cameroon was a no-brainer, as it was one of the closest training centers to home. Even though it was just a few days to application deadline, I applied, and here I am today. Due to ongoing crisis in the Anglophone region of Cameroon that was perpetually putting the lives of residents and visitors at risk, the Mbingo program was officially closed, and my training was cut short after 2 years. So that marked the beginning of my transition to this beautiful country called Kenya, but it was not as easy as it sounds. I waited for about 4 months in Nigeria doing nothing, but just waking up every morning to click the refresh button on my email account, hoping to see an email from PAC's 10-week program saying I can resume my training. It got to a time I felt continuing with my training was not going to happen anymore. However, in April 2019, we got a green light to book our ticket to Kenya. In all, the last 3 years of my training here in 10-week Kenya was great. In fact, it was a huge blessing in terms of being exposed to another PAC's training program different from what I experienced in my first 2 years. All PAC's training sites have their pros and cons, but I have to say that I'm proud to have completed the last 3 years of my training at one of the best PAC's training sites. Sadly, during the course of my training here, I lost my mother, and this required my family and I to travel back home on a very short notice, to which the entire 10-week hospital community responded robustly and showed us boundless love in cash and kind. To this we say thank you very much. To the resident, I would like to say, if someone tells you surgical residency is a bed of roses, ask him or her where she trained. For me, it wasn't a bed of roses, and for you, I don't think it will be. You may not experience what I've experienced so far, but know that whether or not you like it, and later in your training, challenges will come, and when they come, remember what is written in Proverbs 3, verse 5 to 6. I think it has been read earlier today. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. The key word here in verse 6 says, in all your ways, not one of your ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path.